The big buzzword right now in marketing is privacy. And when you're talking about privacy in email, you have to start with GDPR. So what is GDPR and what does it mean for email marketing? Well, when we're talking about something like GDPR, you go straight to the source. So when you go to gdpr.eu, here is their definition. The GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, is the toughest privacy and security law in the world. Right there, starting off, you should pay attention. Sounds like they mean business. Though it was drafted and passed by the European Union, the EU, it imposes obligations onto organizations anywhere, right? Organizations anywhere, so long as they target or collect data related to people in the EU. The regulation was put into effect on May 25th, 2018. The GDPR will levy harsh fines against those who violate its privacy and security standards, with penalties reaching into the tens of millions of euros. Well, if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. Now, before we move on and talk about what that means, I think it's important to have this disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice for you or your company to use in complying with EU data privacy laws like GDPR. What I am going to do is tell you what I believe you need to do, or at least where you need to focus your efforts in and around GDPR as an email marketer. So for those of you who may be thinking, well, but it went into play on May 25th, 2018. It was probably just a bit of a fad, and it's starting to ease up now. GDPR fines totaled more than 980 million euros. That's over $1.1 billion in the third quarter of 2021 alone. That's 20 times higher than the combined total of Q1 and Q2 of the same year, and triple the amount of all the fines in 2020. So even though we're getting further away from the implementation of GDPR, they are not backing down from their statement to levy harsh fines against those who violate its privacy policy and security standards at all. So now that you're likely good and scared, let's talk about what exactly GDPR means. And to do that, I think we start with consumer rights. That's what this is all about. So here's what the GDPR states the consumer rights are. 1, consumers must consent to having their personal data processed. Now remember, we're talking about EU residents only, right? EU residents only, but we're talking about global application. So if you have someone from the EU who visits your website and you collect their data, then these policies apply to you with that subscriber. So that subscriber must consent to having their personal data processed, meaning if you want to create them as a subscriber, they have to consent by doing more than hitting a submit button. Number 2, consumers can access their data at any time. So if you're building data on someone, right, you're building a data file, then the consumer must be able to access that data anytime they want. Number 3, consumers can request that their data be completely deleted from your system, no record. Number 4, consumers can object to marketing communications. Now, this is a big one. So when you have your opt-in or subscription forms, your lead capture forms, when someone is opting in to receive your lead magnet, they can choose to opt out of marketing. They can still give you their contact information, but you can't use it, right? It's very confusing and it's something that we all need to be aware of. Okay, finally, consumers must be informed of any kind of data breach. And by now, we've all received the emails from whether it's big box retailers or well-known e-commerce companies that your data may have been exposed in a breach. Well, they used to not have to do it, but now they definitely do, especially with anyone in the EU. And I'll tell you, so do you. So it is your job as an email marketer, as a publisher, as anyone collecting data to make sure that these statements are true about consumers and the way that they can interact with your data. So let's go through a real quick GDPR checklist. Here's the things that you can do next to make sure that you're compliant or you get compliant with GDPR. The first thing you need to do is audit your privacy policies. Privacy policies have to be easy to find, easy to read, and easy to understand. Now, it goes past email with GDPR and the cookie policy. You have to include detailed information about any and every third-party cookie that happens if someone accepts cookies on your site. So what are the cookies? What's the term? And what is the purpose? And additionally, you have to link over to any type of security or policies on the platform at which the cookie is generated. Now, the next thing you need to do is audit your mailing list. You have to figure out if you actually have consent to contact your EU subscribers. When the GDPR rolled out on May 25th, 2018, that was the deadline for when you had to reconfirm subscription of any EU subscribers. They had to reconsent and almost re-opt in. Now, did you do that? Do you actually have permission to email GDPR, based on GDPR standards, anyone in the EU that happens to be on your database? I can't answer that question, but you probably need to. You need to audit your forms and your data collection. So do you have the required checkbox for consent for EU visitors on all your forms? Do you have the ability for them to accept or decline cookies? What happens if they say no to either of those things? So I'll tell you, the main thing you need to do to be compliant in GDPR is to make sure you have a quality GDPR technology partner. Now, by now, most email providers are GDPR compliant, and you can turn on a setting in any of your applications. But it's always good to check. So I would add to this audit, contact your email service provider, and inquire about GDPR compliance and the settings within your account. Finally, you need to audit your opt-out and customer data processes, right? Who can access your customer data internally and externally? Do you have access to all customer data by any and every employee? What about freelancers or outsourcers? What about agencies or service providers that you work with? What about the technology services that you use? Who has access to your customer's data? You have to know, and you have to tell the customer. And then, can it be deleted? Do you have a process? Do you know everywhere the customer's data is stored so that if the customer were to ask to delete it, you would know where to go, right? You need to have these processes figured out and documented so that if it happens, you don't receive one of those heavy fines that the GDPR is very excited and happy to levy. Now, here's a look at two forms, kind of a before and after, a compliant form before GDPR and post GDPR. So the non-compliant form has a statement. It has a statement that by filling this form out, you are accepting the privacy policy in terms of this publisher or advertiser. That's no longer compliant. When you're displaying a form to any EU visitor, you must have them check a box. It can't be pre-checked. They have to actually take an action to confirm before subscription. And if they don't, then you can't contact them. So that's GDPR. While it's not fun, it is our reality. It's everyone's reality. So the good news is we're all on the same terms. We're all on the same playing field. We all have to deal with the same constraints. Now, GDPR can be a really good excuse for you to get compliant. GDPR can be a really good excuse for you to put in some healthy practices and for you to re-engage with some of your subscribers. I'll tell you that GDPR may be the most recent, but it's not the last change. And you can be sure that if the EU has instituted this, that there may be their first, but they won't be the last. So choose to get compliant now. Choose to figure out a way to thrive in these new regulatory times, and you'll be prepared when the next wave comes.